Okay, here's your second podcast about Chapter 5 for different kinds of tissues in the body. This one we're going to concentrate mostly on the connective tissues. So connective tissues are your most abundant tissues that are found in the body, and their main job is just what their name says. It binds structures together, so to connect structures together. But they also are going to provide support and protection. They give a framework so everything sticks together. They're going to actually fill up space throughout the body, storage of fat, producing your blood cells, okay, fighting infection, and repairing skin and tissue. So your connective tissues are incredibly important, and they are found everywhere throughout the body. They are made up of scattered cells all throughout the place that are mixed into an intracellular matrix. So there's like all sorts of different kinds of cells mixed in with different proteins and all sorts of stuff that make up your connective tissue. They have a ground substance that is a semi-solid type of substance with these different fibers and proteins that get mixed in. Very good blood supply, and actually blood is one of your types of connective tissue, and the cells are able to reproduce and repair themselves within connective tissue. So within our connective tissue there are three main types of cells. Mast cells, okay, are a type of cells that are going to help to prevent blood clots. So they're going to release things like anticoagulants into the blood and keep your blood from sticking together. You have macrophages. Macrophages are phagocytic. That means that they are consumers. So when things get into your body that don't belong, or when you have worn out materials in your body that you need to get rid of, macrophages are going to do that. So they will consume the things that aren't supposed to be there anymore and then break them down. And then fibroblasts are the third type of cell. These are the most abundant type of cell, and they're going to make the different fibers. Fibers are made of proteins. So everything in your body, your whole entire structure, is all of your different proteins. And these specialized cells are going to make the proteins that make up your connective tissue. And that's the reason why you can pinch your skin and lift it up a little bit without just tearing the skin right off. It doesn't come off. It's connected underneath, mainly because of the connective tissue and the fibers that are there. So those fibers that we find within your body, there's a couple of different kinds. Your collagenous fibers are made up of a protein called collagen, okay, and they are the major structural protein of the body. So they are going to be making up the majority of the structure that you have. They're strong and flexible, okay, but they're not very elastic, so they don't have a whole lot of stretch to them. And these are the ones that are going to make up your bones, your ligaments, your tendons. So they have a little bit of give, but not a whole lot. Okay, so they're flexible, but they're not elastic, so you can't stretch them forever. If anybody's ever torn a ligament or sprained an ankle, you know that they will only stretch so far before you have a major problem. So that's why you have your elastic fibers. Your elastic fibers are much smaller, and they're made of the protein called elastin. We also call them yellow fibers. They're not as strong, but they are very, very elastic. So your respiratory structures, your vocal cords, these are elastic fibers. So if you think about your vocal cords, they're vibrating and moving all the time. Some of you more than other people because you talk so much, but they have to be able to constantly move. And if you've ever had laryngitis, then you have overdone it with your vocal cords, and they can get swollen, and then they don't move as well, and you actually can lose your voice. Okay, so you can take a look at where some of these different kinds of fibers come into play. So up here we have our epithelial tissues. So here we've got a single layer of columnar tissues. They're attached by that non-living basement membrane, which is basically a bunch of proteins. And then mixed in all over the place in here, you've got different kinds of fibers, right? So you've got elastic fibers, you've got your collagen fibers. Here's a fat cell that is actually surrounded by its own basement membrane. Here's that kind of semi-solid ground substance that everything's in. Here's a couple of other types of cells that will be in there. Here's the fibroblast. It's going to make all these different fibers that the body needs. So there's a lot of stuff, and you can see there's not really any rhyme or reason. They've just kind of mixed in the connective tissue all over the place. And they're scattered about the body within this basic tissue. And they're constantly doing their jobs. So here is what it would really look like, a real picture of it. So like here, the BV stands for blood vessel. So the blood vessel, that it would be simple squamous surrounding that blood vessel, and then all around it you have got all your different kinds of cells. So here's your fibroblasts making the different fibers, the matrix holding everything together. Here's another blood vessel over here. So it's just kind of a scattering. There's no rhyme or reason to where things are necessarily when you look at connective tissue. Okay, just another one with your different categories. Again, here's your epithelial cells. The basal lamina is another name for the basement membrane, so they sit right on top of there. And again, you've just got all of these different kinds of things going on. You've got your mast cells, you've got your elastic fibers, there's your fibroblasts. Here's going to get rid of the stuff that doesn't belong there anymore, your collagen fibers. They're just kind of mixed up all together, making it nice and strong. So when we look at the different kinds of connective tissue, there's loose connective tissue, which is also called areolar tissue. This is the stuff that is binding your skin to the rest of your body. This is the reason why you can pick up and pinch your skin without pulling it off completely. It's just right there. You can only stretch it so far because it's connected to connective tissue. It fills up the spaces between your muscles. Everything, there's not any loose stuff happening in your body. Everything is connected to something else. So you have loose connective tissue all throughout your body. And it's called loose because it is flexible. You can do, it's malleable. But it's everywhere and it's making everything connected to everything else. So you don't have a single organ in your body just kind of bouncing around wherever. Everything's connected to something else. Adipose tissue is your fat tissue. Mostly it's found beneath your skin. That's the fat that we typically can see on people that are overweight. You also have a lot of adipose tissue around your kidneys and around the eyeballs. Your abdominal membranes have this. So fat tissues can provide cushioning and insulation, okay, because they are stores of energy. The cells are called epidocytes. And basically what happens with a fat cell, if you look at these, all of the cellular material for these cells are stuck over on the sides of the cells. See, it's like kind of darker, and then all in here it's just filled with fat. So the more fat that you have in your body, the more that's being stored, the bigger your fat cells are going to get. And it's really hard to break down that fat because your body's going to use other energy reserves first. What you've eaten, what's stored in your liver, and then it will go and start breaking down these fat tissues. So it can be really hard to get rid of fat. If somebody does liposuction, they're actually pulling all of these little fat cells out of there. But the thing is they'll come back later if need be. So if you continue to eat too much or gain weight for whatever reason, the fat cells will come back and they will fill back up with fat. All right, your fibrous connective tissue is also called your dense connective tissue. So it sounds just like it is. These are the thick collagenous fibers that we were talking about. And then they are kind of surrounded by elastic fibers. There's not a lot of cells in here and they don't have a good blood supply. That's why you have very slow healing. So if you've ever had a sprain, you know it can take a really long time for that to heal. Because a sprain is when you pull your tendons, which connect your muscles to your bones, and they get stretched out and then they get swollen. And it can take quite some time for them to heal. Ligaments, sometimes when a ligament tears, the only way to fix it is with surgery because the healing would be so slow that you would end up with scar tissue before you could ever fix it. And ligaments are connecting your bones to bones. All right, cartilage is another type of connective tissue. Cartilage is, a lot of people kind of think of it as like soft bone. It's part of the bone system, but it's not actually bone. There's different kinds of cartilage. So there's hyaline cartilage, which covers the ends of the bones. So it's also called articular cartilage. It's found, this does just say nose, not noise, your nose, and within your respiratory passages, like your trachea is made of this kind of cartilage. So it's somewhat flexible. It gives good protection, but it's not... it's not overly rigid. Elastic cartilage is much more flexible, so you can feel this if you just flip over your external ear, your earlobe at the top. That's cartilage right there, and it's very flexible, and you can see that. Your larynx is your voice box, so that is filled up with those fibers, and that is also very flexible, so that you can make various sounds. Fibrocartilage is the very tough cartilage. It's made up of a lot of the collagenous fibers that we've talked about, and those are the discs that are between your vertebrae. Those are discs, full discs of cartilage, and they need to be really, really tough and strong, because think about the amount of impact you're putting on your spinal column every day. your full weight is basically squishing down on these. So sometimes people will get them and they'll get swollen and they'll push out a little bit, and that can be really painful for people. Your menisci are also this type of cartilage. So you have a membrane in your kneecap called the meniscus, and that can sometimes get torn or whatever, but that helps to protect that joint because that's a very movable joint, a lot going on within there. All right, bone is also a type of connective tissue. Okay, we'll talk more about bone tissue when we get to the skeletal system, but it's very rigid due to the different salts in there, and the biggest amount of salt that you have in there is from calcium. But there's lots of layers to bone, and there's these canals all throughout there, and there's special types of cells called osteocytes. The canals are going to allow blood vessels and blood supply to your bone because your bone is a living tissue. So again, we'll get more into bone tissue when we get to the skeletal system. And then blood is also a tissue. Blood is circulated throughout the body, and it's got a lot of different kinds of cells in it. You've got your white blood cells, which are going to fight diseases. You've got your red blood cells, which are going to be carrying oxygen around for your body. Platelets, which are going to be helping you to clot your blood. And then the plasma is the liquid part that has everything dissolved in it and moving everything about. So here you can see one of these cells. That's a red blood cell. And this big thing in the middle here, that would be a type of white blood cell. So again, when we get to the circulatory system, we will talk a lot more about the different blood tissues. All right, we're only going to very briefly talk about muscle tissue here. There's three main types of muscle tissue. You have cardiac, which is your heart, skeletal, which is all of the muscles that are attached to your bones, and then smooth muscle, which makes up some of your organs. Okay, so skeletal muscle's main job is to provide movement. Okay, this is voluntary. That means you can control it, and it's attached to your skeleton. Okay, smooth muscle, we call that the muscles of the organs. It's not every organ. Like your liver is not made of smooth muscle, but muscles that have to do involuntary movement, organs that have to do involuntary movement are made of smooth muscle. For example, your stomach and your esophagus have to be contracting all the time in order for you to digest food, so they're made up of muscle. Cardiac, remember cardio means heart, is only found in your heart, nowhere else in the body. And again, this is involuntary. You don't have to think about it. Your heart just beats automatically. Okay, and the last type of tissue, again, we're going to spend a lot more time with this later in the year, is your nerve tissue, mainly found in your brain, your spinal cord, and then the nerves that go around the body. There's two main types of cells that make up your nervous tissue. Neurons are the ones that are going to transmit signals around the body, and then neuroglia are going to protect and support those neurons so that they can do their job correctly. Okay, so those are your four types of tissue. So we talked about epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous tissue. And again, most of those we're going to go into a lot more detail later on in the year.